Good evening, everyone. I am very excited to be here with you tonight for another installment of Conversations with CCWP. My name is Tori Como Plowden. I am a reproductive and endocrinology and infertility physician at Walter Reed, and I'm also one of the co-chairs of CCWP this year. We're so happy to have you tonight. The CCWP, which is the Council on Concerns of Women Physicians, works consistently to support, empower, and address the unique professional and personal challenges of women physicians. And tonight we have quite the conversation for you on a topic that is so important. Tonight we'll be talking about Black women, mental health, and sisterhood, a path to healing and empowerment. So without further ado, I will introduce Dr. Angela T. Anderson. She is a child and adolescent psychiatrist, adult psychiatrist, and pediatrician who works clinically at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Dr. Anderson is an assistant professor of clinical psychiatry and pediatrics at the University of Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine. She also serves as co-chair of the National Medical Association's Council on Concerns of Women Physicians. Dr. Anderson, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Plowden. I am ecstatic. I'm excited, all the words to be joining you all this evening for this conversation. So welcome to our session titled Black Women, Mental Health and Sisterhood, a Path to Healing and Empowerment. We are so grateful to have you all join us in this critically important conversation on the mental health challenges faced by Black women and how sisterhood can be a catalyst for healing and empowerment. And so before we get started, I want to frame our conversation this evening by exploring some statistics that underscore the importance of this conversation. And so thinking about Black women and mental health, some of the key statistics I found are the following. The prevalence of depression in Black women has been estimated to be as high as 27%, with one study noting the true prevalence may actually be higher, given in this population there is likely underreporting, underdiagnosis, and a lack of treatment. Now, the prevalence also of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is higher among Black Americans, especially Black women, with nearly 1 in 8 African American women experiencing PTSD at some point during their lifetime. Now, in the United States, 29 to 44% of Black women experience postpartum depression symptoms, although not all properly identified and or connected to mental health care services. Now, this next statistic is not commonly thought about, but the cultural beauty standards and discrimination contribute to possible eating disorders that are often not recognized and therefore not diagnosed. Also, compared with the general population, African Americans are less likely to be offered either evidence-based medication therapy or psychotherapy. And notably, although suicide rates have been seen to be lower than other demographics in the past, the rates of suicide are increasing among Black women. And adolescent Black females have significantly higher rates of suicidal ideation compared to their Caucasian and male peers. And for Black youth, rates of suicide have risen faster than any other racial ethnic group in the past 2 decades. So the impact of these mental health challenges is compounded by significant barriers to accessing care, cultural stigma around mental health issues, lack of reputation among mental health professionals, and economic barriers, just to name a few. So why is this conversation vital? We are in a crisis. And that's why we're having this conversation, because sisterhood plays a transformative role in promoting mental wellness. By cultivating supportive spaces like this, where Black women can share their stories, provide mutual support, and validate each other's experiences, we can reduce isolation and build community, and community that shows resilience as well. These connections offer a platform for identifying and affirming the shared experiences that we may have. So, during this session, we will be exploring the historical impact of mental health and physical health care for Black women, barriers to care, and how to break those barriers, and finally, strategies for resilience and empowerment. We will have time for Q&A, so please be sure to put your questions in the Q&A section on this Zoom channel. So let us tonight unite to deepen our understanding of these challenges, celebrate resilience, and forge a path rooted in healing and empowerment. So again, I am excited you're here joining us this evening. And at this time, because I know we are all ready for this conversation, I will ask our discussants to join me on camera to introduce themselves and their professional background, including clinical and/or research areas of focus. This evening, we will begin with Dr. Altha Stewart, followed by Dr. Nicole B. Washington, and then Dr. Regina James. Thank you all for being here this evening. So excited to be joining you. Dr. Stewart, I will
Thank
turn
you.
it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anderson. And hello, everyone. It is indeed my honor to have been asked to join. I said before we started, I'm the official OG on this panel, and I relish that title. Because I think beginning with a bit of a historical perspective, you gave such a wonderful introduction to start this conversation. I think just a touch of historical context would be helpful because Black women and mental health are inextricably tied together since the beginning of the practice of psychiatry here in the United States. I won't go back through the history globally. I think we don't have time for that. But just know that we have been at the forefront, both at the discussion level as well as at the point of just what you talked about, Dr. Anderson, finding ways to support each other because the system systematically did not support us and our needs. And so if you go back in American history, psychiatric history anyway, or mental health history, you start with 1844 when the official organization that we now know as the APA was formed. And it was men. It was white men, as one would expect from that time. But there was a consideration for Black people because one of the first things they did was establish a committee on the problem of the colored insane. And so, as part of the history of the country, and for anybody who's a Hamilton fan, there are some gaps in the story that I think would have made an even better musical. But that's for another discussion. But I think when you think about the way that American psychiatry started, grew, developed, and has evolved into what we have today, it is it is exceptional, first of all, that Black women have survived some of the things that have happened in the name of mental health, about them, towards them, and to them. But as exceptional creatures as we are, I think it's important to understand just a few key things. Over the course of time, we as Black women have had to identify our problems, deal with those problems, and support other people like us with those problems in the absence often of a formal system of care to support our needs. And we've done, I think, an incredible job of survival and in some respects, even thriving in the face of what was thrown at us. But it has taken its toll. The statistics that you shared at the beginning include the amount of trauma experienced by Black women in the name of mental health, the number of Black women that we have all worked with, treated, who have given us the narrative stories of how they were treated in the system. The things that you talked about in terms of what's happening to young girls who will then grow into women who will need mental health care. These are the kinds of things that make this conversation so important. We have to take mental health and mental illness, if you will, out of the closet and begin to openly discuss it. And there have been some people who have helped to make this possible. I'm thinking of B.B. Moore Campbell. and the books that she wrote, including 72-Hour Hold, about her own journey in the area of mental health. I'm thinking of Terry Williams and her book about depression in the face of trying to remain productive and active and professional. And even when you look at the stories of Zora Neale Hurston, you hear and see the flavor of depression in her story writing as well as in her personal story. And so I try often to draw on examples that maybe people will relate to more than mental health or psychiatry. And Toni Morrison writes brilliantly about some of the challenges that we face that have a psychological component. Um, Alice Walker, in many of her stories, has shared. I don't know that it's her story, but she has certainly shared narratives that suggest the characters she writes about are dealing with these kinds of struggles. Recently, I became even more enamored of Kimberly Crenshaw and her work on retrenchment. And there is a thread in her work about progress and retrenchment that clearly is associated with the struggle psychologically that we as women having this intersectionality issues. We are not just Black, we are not just female. And in the case of Black women who are professionals, medical or psychiatric, we are not just that. You know, we are full human beings with lots of challenges and lots of fun that we want to have and relationships we want to build, where structurally, the system is not designed to support our thriving in those things. A couple of years ago, I did a presentation with colleagues on is it burnout or arson? With arson being the most severe, that I can't take care of arson because that's somebody consciously, deliberately doing something using the system to harm me. Whereas burnout may be I don't organize my time and we talk about wellness and all of that stuff. So I think the timing of this discussion is excellent. I think we are moving into a time in our own history here in the United States where if we aren't supporting each other, I'm not sure where we will wind up. And you know, the other two young doctors on this panel are for me what the future holds at its best. You know, thinking working, thriving in their own way in the areas they have chosen professionally, and sharing that with others. The final thing I will say, because Dr. Anderson, I can talk forever, but the final thing I want to say has to do with training the next generation. I am still meeting young women, medical students and residents who want to go into psychiatry or are in psychiatric training, who are telling me their experiences that are too reminiscent of my own experiences, being the only Black, being systematically excluded, being harassed, chastised, abused psychologically in ways that clearly have a racist component. And that's an area that we have to do something about. We've got to create a training system where young women, particularly young Black women who want to join this profession, can feel welcome and that they belong. And right now, that is not the common feeling that I am hearing from young people. And for unfortunately, being OG, you get to talk to a lot of people, and they bring things to you that they won't tell anyone else. So I'm about spreading the message that we all have a role to play in helping the next generation of professional women in medicine and in psychiatry specifically, helping them to not have this struggle internally, helping them to share with each other and support each other, and helping them to figure out ways to combat the systemic racism that by its very design wants to keep us out and to kill us. It's a lethal system. There is no question in my mind. So I will stop there because I think I probably have talked enough for an opening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. No, I mean, you were dropping gems in the first 3 minutes, so I appreciate you. I'm going to turn it to Dr. Washington.
I should have requested for my position to be changed. Who wants to go after Dr. Stewart? Who? Who? So I am Dr. Nicole Washington. I am a psychiatrist. I I specialize in Black women. And I haven't always specialized in Black women. I started my career off in a different direction. And actually, I don't even know if Dr. Stewart knows this. I went to get a master's in public health after a conversation I had with her at a conference, like when BPA was in Jamaica, when the Black Psychiatrists of America conference was in Jamaica in like 2011 or something. It was so many years ago. And after a conversation with her, I went to get a master's in public health, and I learned that physicians were drowning and that we had a physician mental health crisis. And that was where my trajectory kind of changed. And as I started to look at physicians, and because I am a Black woman psychiatrist, and I think the numbers are now up to maybe 4% of psychiatrists are Black. I mean, it used to be 2, so I guess we making ground. Up to 4 maybe is what we're seeing. People are looking for us to take care of them. They are looking for us, as my grandma would say, in the daytime with a flashlight. They looking for us. They are trying to find us. And I learned that it's not just Black women doctors, it's Black women attorneys, it's Black women C-suite folks, it's Black women entrepreneurs, it's Black women, what fill in the blank, whatever your career is, we are all out here trying to function in spaces that were never meant for us. They weren't built for us, and largely a lot of them haven't changed much in hundreds of years. The professions are still not meant for us, and so we are spending all of our days trying to force our square pegs in these round holes, and we are wearing ourselves out, and it's just happening all over the place. And as a physician and as an attorney and those in law enforcement and any healthcare field and a lot of our fields, what we find is that our mental health is tied to the fact that our day to day we are in a system that largely is discriminatory against us. Like I'm a psychiatrist. I love being a psychiatrist. I love medicine. I love it as a career field. But I also have to reconcile every day with the fact that I am the man and I am fighting the man all at the same time. And that is exhausting. And you feel that if you're an attorney or if you're in law enforcement or you're a nurse or you're whatever, like you are constantly at in conflict with yourself and having to constantly check yourself to make sure because you were trained by that same racist system and having to check yourself every day and make sure that you're on track. And so that's where I've shifted my focus. So I do a lot of work with women, a lot of work in hormonal spaces of perimenopause and menopause and pregnancy and hormone related mental health stuff, but just women who come to me and say, I'm exhausted. Like I am tired. I am fighting every day. I'm fighting patients. I'm fighting clients. I'm fighting my own institution for these people. I am fighting all day and I'm tired. And so that is where I am and why I'm here.
Well, we are glad you are here, Dr. Washington. And Dr. James, please share with us, some of your background and what keeps you, centered in this working with Black women.
Oh, in terms of my background, I trained in child and adolescent psychiatry and then went to actually the National Institutes of Health and did work around clinical trials in young kids with behavioral disorders. But I must say, no matter what I did and where I did it, it all had to sort of be grounded in equity issues. So even with the clinical trials work that I did at the Clinical Center at NIH, it was really looking at differences among racial and ethnic groups. Then I moved on and did both international as well as domestic work with mothers and children around mental health issues. Again, still grounding that around mental health equity. I then went to a clinical research organization and consultancy where I served as chief medical officer, again, working with pharma companies around clinical trial diversity and now currently at the American Psychiatric Association as Deputy Medical Director and VP of Diversity and Health Equity. And again, working around diversity and health equity. And am very just fortunate to be able to join this conversation because what I hope that we have an opportunity to talk about is really looking at sort of the impact of the historical context of what has happened to Black people in general, and how that has impacted their mental health. I think that the historical trauma really was sort of a fertile ground for mistrust, which led to a lot of the negative and poor health outcomes that we are experiencing as Black women. And I know we're going to get into further discussion, so I'll just leave it at that and look forward to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. James. I think that was a great transition to our first topic. It really hones in on that historical context. So to the discussants, and I know Dr. Stewart, you really kind of started setting that foundation of this conversation. My question to you is, how does the historical treatment of Black women as it relates to both physical and mental health care shape mental health outcomes for Black women today? And I'll have any one of you please start this conversation.
Well, I could start. So when I think about the historical trauma piece, I really like to look at it through sort of two different lenses: a biological lens and sort of a medical exploitation lens. So you think about the trauma that Black women experienced long time ago. The biological lens, I think, helps anchor us to know that trauma actually does have biological, physiologic impacts on our bodies with epigenetics, those DNA changes that happen, the way that our DNA is read, and the fact that these markers are passed on through generations. There is biological evidence that trauma is passed on. And I really like to underscore that, because sometimes people say, well, yeah, we know that there was medical exploitation in the past of Black women, but that was in the past. But there is biological evidence today that this is something biological, just not storytelling. This is something that is passed on from generation to generation. So one, looking at it through a biological lens lets us know that this is something that is truly passed on from a scientific standpoint. But then from that medical exploitation lens, Dr. Stewart mentioned in the beginning that the APA was founded in 1844, which was about the same time that all of us know the whole story of Dr. James Marion Sims and his experimentations were around that same time, around 1840. And that's when they were using Black enslaved women to do experimentations to basically understand how to repair complications of pregnancy. So, I like to say her name, Lucy. Lucy was an enslaved Black woman who suffered without anesthesia. These types of trauma, yes, they did happen years and years ago, but these types of trauma are generational, and these markers are passed down, which leads to mistrust, which leads to increased risk for depression and anxiety. So this historical piece is not just about the biology, but also about the medical exploitation that has happened. And she's just one example, and that was in the 1800s. I mean, you can come a little bit forward with the civil rights activist, Fannie Lou Hamer. So, remember, she had that fibroid on her uterine, went in to get the fibroid removed, and without her consent, had hysterectomy. So again, so that medical exploitation, that mistrust, all of that leading to increased risks of what we're seeing now with Black women: poor health outcomes, depression, anxiety, etc. I'll stop there and allow my colleagues to join in the conversation.
Well, I think making the point, and thank you, Dr. James, for that, because I think making the point that these are not just stories. This is not just history. There is biology, scientific evidence to support this, and we can come fast forward to the concerns we now all have about the plight of Black women who are giving birth and not being heard. The problems of pregnancy that are not being responded to. I mean, we all now know the story of what happened to Serena Williams and how she was challenged. And this is someone who had everything she needed to be heard, and even she wasn't heard. So, I think the important thing, especially for anyone born after 1990, and I use that because I think there's something about the mid 30s or so that I think historically we have to remind people of some of these things because for many people in that age group, it's only what you can find on the internet. We're talking about stuff now that was well known, that everybody in medicine understood was going on and did not challenge. Lucy may have been 1840 something, but Fannie Lou Hamer was in the 1960s. And that is, and Henrietta Lacks. Let's not forget Henrietta Lacks. So these are contemporary issues that are being repeated because we haven't figured out or haven't decided to join forces or haven't come up with the right strategy. And it could be any or all or a combination of those things. I'm not trying to place blame, but we have got to, and in my experience, and again, I'm the OG. So in my experience, it has always been Black women who solve these problems. It has always been us who come up with these ideas. And if I had any knowledge that I had had some impact on Nicole going back to school to get her MPH, I'd have said whatever I said to her to five more people because that's what we need. We need research. We need public health officials with this kind of knowledge. We also need people in key positions who appoint these people, but that's a story for another day too. But this is the crux of the matter. If we can't figure out how to translate this science that we know is accurate, true, and believable into strategies and practices and methods of behaving in terms of reaching well-being, and then use those things to change the racist systems, as it was said, into things that at least aren't harming us. It may not always help, but it should not be harmful. The health equity piece is going to be a thread through tonight's conversation, I am certain. So I will stop there.
Yeah, and bringing it on forward, you talk about how does that historical treatment of us shape our mental health outcomes? I think it leads to a lot of defeat. So a lot of the Black women that come see me, they're defeated. They're like, why am I even going to bother trying to get my needs taken care of when I already know what they're going to tell me? And it leads to a lot of defeat. And I completely understand that. I have my own horrendous birthing story. And as a whole physician, I couldn't get somebody to listen to me. And I ended up back in the hospital with postpartum cardiomyopathy because I couldn't get the OB to listen to me. And so you think, well, yeah, if somebody with the medical knowledge can't get somebody to listen, what hope does random Sally Q public person have to get somebody to listen? And so I think it leads to defeat. I think a lot of people show up and they say, I don't even know if you can help me. I think it also leads to not only defeat, but also a little bit of denial because I think we've bought into the rhetoric that, oh, well, we don't deal with that. That's not what we do. I'm not anxious, my nerves just bad. I'm not depressed, but I don't enjoy anything. I'm just going through the motions. We've also bought into it, and I think it leads us to not even have the words to say. It leads Black women to not even have the vocabulary to be able to say, I am depressed. I have anxiety. And I think that's unfortunate because we need to be able to say, hey, this is what's wrong with me, and I need you to help me.
And if I could
You
just
all have,
piggyback on,
oh, please, no, please go ahead.
yeah, if I could just piggyback on that, because I think, Dr. Washington, what you're really speaking about is the strong Black woman schema.
Mhm.
Like basically, we appear unshaken. We can't show any, sign of weakness. We prioritize everybody else and not ourselves, that kind of thing. And so, yes, and that too is historically rooted in trauma and in slavery, stemming from this sort of superwoman syndrome that again increases that extra burden on Black women, that increases their risk for anxiety and depression, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. And we talk about this soft era. I'm in my soft girl era. I'm in my soft era. All the Black women, I'm in my soft era. I need us to be soft, not just about vacations and stuff like that. I want us to be soft and being able to say, I need help. Like calling
Mhm.
your sister and saying, hey, like I need to chat with you. I need to talk to you. I need a dinner. I need a lunch. I need to get together. We have to learn because we have not been taught how to be soft in every aspect, I think, of our lives.
Absolutely. As you all touched on the historical context, hearing, defeat the superwoman syndrome, I'm also curious if we could in on how stigma and what you mentioned and mistrust in the healthcare system has shaped some of the outcomes that I'd even mentioned early on in the conversation, those statistics, Black women not trusting the system, not even going in to get care. Um, let's touch a little bit on that stigma and mistrust in the Black community.
Yeah, we're not showing up. I mean, we're not showing up, and we're waiting until we are literally at the breaking point before we do show up, which makes it that much more of a burden on our lives. It makes it that much more of a disability to us. We can't work like we used to. We can't support all the 50,000 people that we're trying to support. A lot of us are in that sandwich generation. You're caring for parents, you're caring for your own kids, you might be grandkids, you're caring for all these people that are looking to you, and we are just out here breaking. And so I think that's what the stigma and mistrust has really done most negatively to us, is it's caused us to wait until things were about to break before we did something about it.
And there's a number of things that could really impact the stigma. I think we've already talked about like the strong woman syndrome, that we just don't feel like we need to go to someone to get help. And sometimes, unfortunately, as strong as religion and the church can be, sometimes that too can impact the stigma on how we feel about mental health and mental illness. So that too, for the Black woman, because Black women, we're in the church, that too can also play into that stigma piece. We talked about the mistrust, the historical mistrust, but then again, the ongoing issues around discrimination and racism and sexism. All of that is sort of an ongoing impact on the mistrust, which can also impact sort of those poor health outcomes as well. And I think the bottom line is we just really don't talk about it. We don't really talk about it as a community, as a family. There's really a lack of dialogue around mental wellness, mental illness, mental health. There, really isn't a dialogue. It's very extreme if it is. It's either they're crazy, and so, it's a really extreme over there, or, that's just so and so, she stays in the room all the time, and, but there's no true dialogue about it. And so I think because we don't have that dialogue, we don't have that comfort of talking about it as much as we would talk about any other illness. I think that also plays into the stigma. And that stigma can be a personal stigma, like I just feel too ashamed. I'm just not going. I don't want to appear weak. But the public also reinforces that stigma as well. Because people walk around and they'll say their idea of mental illness is a dangerous person or a violent person. So that just really reinforces this sort of negative image of what mental illness is about. So, you got the individual feeling uncomfortable, you got the public, and then of course you have the system itself, the healthcare system and policies. I mean, when you think about mental health parity, right? Why is it that there is a difference between mental health, how much is paid for mental health versus how much is paid for physical health in terms of insurance? So, you're getting this stigma reinforcement from all sides.
Yeah. And I would just add, because these were both excellent responses to the stigma issue. I think what I would add is that there is an awful lot of self-talk, both the self-talk that Dr. James was just talking about. I can't be viewed that way. I'm not that crazy. That's what crazy looks like, and that's not me. To what Dr. Washington said about, I'm just, I can't do it. Maybe you can't even help me. That kind of self-talk, when someone actually finally gets to the point where they come in to see someone who cares enough to do a good assessment, to be culturally sensitive and aware of the comprehensive nature of the issues they're bringing in. The self-talk changes then to, oh my God, it's my fault. I should have taken care of this. I'm such a horrible person. I must be crazy. And we have got to practice a different kind of self-talk, We have got to practice the self-talk of empowerment, of engaging, of everything these ladies have said. We've got to start helping people practice that. And you don't have to be a psychiatrist to help people learn to do the positive self-talk. I waited a long time. However, there is help for me. Is a great starting point for anybody. Your sister, your minister, your primary care doc, your OBGYN. Everybody can participate in shifting the self-talk to something that helps them get on a positive path to growth, empowerment, and well-being.
I was saying amen while I was on mute because I mean it's critical how we talk to ourselves, what we think about is so critical. This conversation now about stigma, I want to shift gears because I want to think about the person then who decides they want to get treatment, that they believe that something is not, going in a direction that they think, I finally need some assistance here. And so I would like to ask, what are possible challenges that Black women may face when seeking mental health treatment? What have you observed? What have you heard, working in the system, whether clinically or in the different areas that you do work currently?
We are all looking for help from someone that we trust. Typically, trust is described as somebody who understands me, i.e., someone that is like me. And there just aren't enough Black women in the behavioral health, no matter what professional group you're looking at. There just aren't enough. And so the things that Nicole said about, we used to be 2%, now we're 4%, so we've doubled, but that's not enough to deal with the range of issues and the number of people with those issues. So we have got to both accelerate training and encouraging Black women to get into these professional, not organizations, fields, and also to push the notion that even someone who does not look like you can be helpful with the proper training and commitment and engagement capacity and willingness to humble themselves and say, I don't understand that. I'm going to work with you until we both get an answer to that, and make that a trusting relationship. And that's an age-old principle and practice that goes back, long before I became a psychiatrist, where some of the strong Black psychiatrist figures promoted that we won't have enough for a long time, so we've got to do a better job of training those who at least are willing to learn. And I would personally vote for different kinds of supervision and holding people accountable who are not Black for working with Black patients and training Black residents and fellows and medical students. But, I'm in an academic setting, so I have these grand hopes.
I, they are grand. They are grand. I think a big barrier, it is that trust. It's that I think what most of us want when we go into a mental health setting is I want help, but I don't want to have to explain my existence to be able to get it. I don't want to have to take the time to explain who I am and where I'm coming from and how we arrived here. And there is a feeling. I mean, I see it in the face of somebody when a new fairly new patient says something to me and I respond back with something and they're like, like you can see the shoulders come down. You can see them relax because it's like I don't even have to explain to you why that was a problem. Now we can move forward. I don't have to spend 30 minutes in this session just explaining to you, what my language meant, what my slang meant, what my intention was behind saying something. And it's that understanding, it's that familiarity. You just want to be able to feel comfortable. And I don't know that that's something that we get a lot of.
And I'll just add, in addition to the trust that was already mentioned, and essentially cultural congruence, which is basically somebody who looks like you, feels like you, thinks like you. I mean, they don't have to, like Dr. Stewart said, they don't have to be Black, but it's great if they are. But if they at least can understand you, so kind of culturally relate to you, that congruence, I think are big barriers. But also just some practical issues as well, like insurance coverage. Some people who, just take cash, and people can't afford that as well. When they do find someone, if they do find someone, it's a long wait. And then when they do find someone, it's a long wait. So that kind of, is a barrier. And then it depends, if it's a single mom and she's working, then it's initial childcare and transportation, getting time off work, so there's other little bubbles that kind of interfere with the ability to actually get the appropriate care that you would need, or additional challenges. But definitely trust is huge.
Absolutely. In that tone, I'm curious, what practical strategies then can Black women use to identify and access culturally responsive, affirming mental health care?
I think just like we inquire. We will hunt somebody down in a store if we see their hair and we like it, and we want to know who did your hair, what color is that, da, 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 da. Like, I just want us to be as aggressive. I want us to text the homegirl text thread and say, hey, who in here is seeing a therapist that they really like? Who in here? We get on our social media platforms and put questions out. I'm looking for a plumber. Get on there. I'm looking for a therapist. Who has one they really like? Who has a therapist that listens to Black women, and see what kind of responses we get. I would just like to see us be just as assertive and just as passionate about that as we are some other things.
So I would agree, definitely leveraging those community networks, as you say, your friends, your sorors, members of the church, whoever, to give you some ideas of where to go. Even if it's at work, employee assistance programs, that may be a venue or an avenue for you to actually identify someone. There's directories that you can go online. If you put in Google Black psychiatrist or whatever, and see what comes up. But there are a number of directories. I know the Black Psychiatrists of America has a directory. I know the American Psychiatric Association. You can put in your zip code and state, and find. So just using those directories, calling your insurance company, and, seeing who's out there, and then kind of going down the list of what of who you can find. And then once you do find someone, I know a common question that people tell me that they ask is boldly, have you ever worked with Black women before? And that gives them a sense of the comfort of this new person that they've identified. Are they good with Black women? Did they get uncomfortable when they heard that question? But just so that because you may not be able to find a Black woman psychiatrist, you may not be able to find a Black psychiatrist. You may not be able to find a psychiatrist. So, knowing that, keeping your options open, just seeing, are they comfortable with you? Do you have to explain everything to them when you're talking to them? Because that's not going to work. So, just those types of things, directories, leveraging people that, EAP at work. Yeah. And
Yeah.
also being open to the option of telehealth.
Mhm.
If they aren't physically where you are you willing to see someone via telehealth?
And because both of the responses gave me an idea, I'm going to offer two things. Every woman I know has a circle of friends that gets together at some point. And it's for drinks or travel or just to, catch up or just commiserate about something. And if we consciously build into those encounters the questions that Dr. Washington said about just ask, if we consciously do it, it begins the conversation in a safe space because these are our girls. These are the people we trust with our secrets and everything else. So we're not going to be worried about whether she's going to go and tell everybody, she's asking for a therapist. Something must be going on. And what Dr. James reminded me of is the number of times I've talked with benefits managers who are asking me, do I know Black psychiatrists willing to join networks because employees are specifically asking for them and they never thought that was an important thing. And so I think responding to those questionnaires when insurance companies survey us about what do you see a need in the network, responding concretely with, I want a panel of black psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, therapists, is being heard. And even if it can't be, they can't do it, at least we know the questions are being asked. And as we meet people who are interested, we can refer them to those companies and say, hey, I'd love to be on your panel. I hear you got a nice benefit and everything. And this is the patient population I want to see. So I think those are concrete things based on the responses they just gave that come to mind. Again, I'm in rooms sometimes where I hear conversations and can add a flavor, if you will, to it that no one in the room has thought of. Occasionally I just say, excuse me, black woman in the room wants to know. And after a certain age, you get away with stuff. You know, you get away with stuff, and people, they either respect you and don't challenge, or they're afraid of you and don't challenge. And I don't really care which it is. Because if this furthers the conversation so that that insurance company that works in an area where the predominant employee pool is black, they need some black therapists from whatever category on that panel. I'm sorry, I get a little excited about this stuff.
No, we need this energy, and I almost wish I could see how many people are on the call, or even having this conversation in person. But again, I'm even uplifted to this point, about what we're talking about. But speaking of, because I do want to make sure we have time for the Q&A, but I do also want to bring up the last topic, which is thinking strategies for resilience and empowerment. And so I'm going to offer a definition. If resilience is adapting and thriving despite stress, what does resilience look like for Black women facing ongoing structural and interpersonal stressors? And how do we support each other without normalizing these conditions? Because too often we know they are normalized. So, what would you say in response to that question?
My response is rest and joy. Like to me, that's my response. It is rest and it is joy. I think we are very often taught that rest is somehow lazy or that it's the absence of doing something. And I just like to remind people that rest is a verb. It is an action word. It is something you are doing. There is a purpose to your rest. It's not, well, I'm just not doing anything. No, I'm resting. That's a thing. So, change it. Remember the word, as Dr. Stewart reminded us earlier, that self-talk, the words we use for ourselves. I'm not being lazy. I'm resting. And so I think rest and joy to me is how we it's how we build our resilience, rest and joy. And what are the things that bring you joy? Who are your people? Who are your girls? I have a group of women physicians. There's 7 of us. We go out to dinner roughly monthly, and they are my joy. When we get together and meet, they're my joy. We can laugh and we can joke and we can cry and we can get angry and we can threaten people on each other's behalf, and we can do all those things in a private setting. That is it. Our rest and our joy. That's how we build our resilience, because the things outside of us are very likely not to change anytime soon. And we just have to figure out how do we strengthen ourselves, and the best way to do that, rest and joy.
And I
And
think
I
we
would,
have to go ahead,
oh, you go
Regina.
ahead. OG,
Well,
go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, in the context of what Nicole just said, I think we have to remind ourselves, as she said, that rest is a verb. It is not, I'm just being lazy, not doing anything. And that if we really want to help others, we can't pour from an empty vessel. That's a very old saying, and it is very true. So we have to replenish, and whatever brings us the joy, we've got to replenish on a regular basis. It's got to be, this is my time. I'm not dealing with that. And I will admit that it is one of the hardest things to learn to do on a regular routine without prompting from somebody basis. It really is, because that's not our nature as Black women. We don't do well not doing stuff. We have to actually retrain ourselves to not always be doing stuff for either for ourselves or somebody else. Rarely for ourselves as much as we do for others, but we have to retrain. And again, it's that self-talk. I deserve time when I am not thinking about work or other people. I deserve it because in order for me to be ready to think about other people and do things, I got to be energized. I got to have the enthusiasm and the passion to do it well and to pour into them. And that's just, that's non-negotiable at this point. And again, I will acknowledge that I was not this way under 50. I thought that that was the nature of the beast. You just kept working and you kept showing up and you kept doing. And there's something about crossing a half century that opens up a whole different perspective. So for anybody who is not yet there, do not fear 50. It is a critical developmental stage in the life of adults. Enjoy it, embrace it, remember what it can mean for you, and go for it.
Okay, I guess I'll just close that out and say, in addition to the joy and rest, I'll add two more words: connection and community. I think it's research shows that people who are more connected socially actually do better from a mental health standpoint. And we've mentioned tonight, friends, hanging out with friends and girlfriends and whatever, that connection, that community, that I think is really key for resilience. And before I end, I just wanted to share just one statement by Bell Hooks that I think that really sort of encapsulate this. And she says, healing is an act of community. And I think that it's really deep if you think about that, is that connection, that community, your sisters, your friends, that helps with resilience, that helps with healing.
Amen. Well, thank you all. We're not done yet because we have some questions in the Q&A. So what I'll do at this time, I'm going to turn it over to my CCWP council member, Dr. Veronica Wright. She will be leading us in the Q&A, and I'll be back to join you all once that portion of the session is over. Dr. Wright.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anderson. So we are open for questions, and we actually already have two in our Q&A. The first one that we have here is, can you speak to the barrier or perception of a barrier of work discrimination if help is sought? And this is in the setting of healthcare professionals.
Yeah, some of it is true and some of it is urban myth. Some of it is the stories that we've passed down about, oh, there's a doctor who one time did this thing and went to marriage counseling, they lost their job. And we can never really point back to the real story of what went down. I will say there has been a push here in the last several years for medical boards to lighten up a little bit on the question that they ask. It used to be, have you ever been in treatment? And people felt like they had to disclose if they went to therapy when their parents got a divorce when they were 13. It was very, very accusatory and negative. And so that has improved over the years, and several states are now asking more present tense questions. Do you have a mental health disorder or substance use disorder that prevents you from functioning currently? They're not so much asking you about if you've ever been in treatment. And so I do think that's helpful. I think that because stigma is still real, though, I can't tell you that I don't have employers who still look down on employees for seeking out treatment. But I will also say those same employers would look down on you if you allowed your depression and anxiety to interfere with patient care. They would absolutely look down on you if you let that go. So to me, when I'm working with a physician, I'm there to fight with you, for you, beside you. I talk to plenty of medical boards and HR teams and really kind of go to bat for my folks, because I just feel like if the medical board's job is to protect the public and to make sure that the medical pool is doing right by the public, then they need to make sure they're doing right by the medical pool and make sure that people have the ability to get the treatment they need. But we've all seen the recent story of the person who was in the young black woman who was under the care, for loose and lack of a better word, of one of these state-run physician health programs, and that outcome was not favorable. So while I literally cannot tell you it can't happen because we see that it still happens, I I still go back to, but doing nothing may also not be the answer, because doing nothing sets you up for really the one thing most of us have worked the hardest for, are our medical careers. And doing nothing just sets us up to lose like the one thing that we have fought so hard to get, and we continue to fight. And so I say find somebody who's going to fight alongside you if they need to. But again, let's not wait until there's a fight. Let's catch it early. Let's catch it before it's severe, before you're having bad outcomes with patients, before you're missing stuff at work. Like, let's catch it before we get to that point. And I really feel like we'll be okay if we can catch it early enough. But if we don't and we got to fight, we can fight together.
Dr. James, Dr. Stewart, do you have anything else to add to that, or?
I think she did a great job.
And then I have the second question that we had was will be kind of answered at the end of this about the next conversation. But any recommendations for a reading list related to the topics that we're discussing?
I would say any books by Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde. Um, okay, maybe this is personal, Angela Davis. For me, it is. Those are my kind of three go-to women to really make me and help me feel empowered and resilient and just very forward thinking and just not losing hope. Those are the three women that I go to. And Angela and Maya Angelou.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I would second all of those and add, as I said in my opening remarks, Alice Walker, because I think some of the characters speak to the kinds of issues as well as some of the ways that women support each other. One of my new, well, not a new favorite, but Toni Morrison, I cannot recommend highly enough all of her work, because having read a bunch of stuff by her and then watched some interviews that she gave about what she wrote, I am convinced in another life she was a psychiatrist. I am convinced of it. You cannot dissuade me from thinking that way. She has a both an interview style and a compelling approach to dissecting issues that I think comes right out of psychiatric training, at least in my contemporary circle. It may not be going on now, which is kind of a mix of psychodynamic psychotherapy with some in your face community work and some, are you serious? Come on, kind of stuff. So those two stand out. And then again, I will say B.B. Moore Campbell, both the work she did and the development of characters. These are authors that, in my mind, the ones that Dr. James mentioned, and these are authors who were so comfortable with themselves at some point, even when they were uncomfortable in their own skin. They were comfortable enough with themselves as writers to convey something that I think is a lesson for us, and that I think we can use as a way to conceptually look at what I talked about earlier, self-talk. Each of them has a style of self-talk that I think every Black woman I know could benefit from at some point. And if we study them, I gave a talk a couple of years ago at APA about Toni Morrison in a psychiatric context, and I was amazed at how well it went over. Because people who hadn't read her in a while were impressed that she actually had that perspective, and the people who knew nothing about her thought she just wrote these great books that got awards and stuff, but there wasn't anything psychiatric about them. So I think we can, in addition to the regular psychiatric stuff that doctors read and that mental health professionals read, I like to think that if we expand our thinking to incorporate works of literature, dramatic works, and music. That we do a lot more in terms of that cultural congruence that Dr. James talked about earlier, because that's where the average Black person is most comfortable. This whole notion of going to therapy, we're helping them get comfortable with. But if you turn on a certain music or talk about a certain passage in a book or reflect on a show, a Broadway show, or a play that you've seen, people get right into it with you. And that begins to open the discussion and it teaches self-talk. I'm very big on self-talk because we do a lot of harm to ourselves by what we hear ourselves saying to ourselves. And we have got to get away. I don't let, for example, young women cannot talk to me about the reality of imposter syndrome. I don't believe it. I don't buy it. I don't support the notion that there is such a thing when it comes to Black women. Because if we were really imposters, we'd be a lot farther along in this world. We would have achieved everything we ever wanted if we had perfected imposter syndrome. I'm not buying it. We have challenges. We have a a systematically, structurally racist system that we try to thrive in. We ain't imposters. In fact, we are some of the best actresses, as far as I'm concerned, on the face of the earth. So, again, I get very energized when it comes to talking about Black women and what we can do to feel better about ourselves and to feel better in our own skin.
Thank you so much for all those recommendations, Dr. Stewart, and really for such an uplifting response. And this last question, trying to be conscious of time, I think we probably only have time for one more, I think is really relevant, at least to the workspace. So the last one I'll end us with is somebody mentioned, I recently attended a virtual conference where a nationally recognized speaker of Caribbean descent was told that she was articulate by the moderator. It seems that microaggressions like this are not easily able to be addressed. Do you think this is part of the problem? And how should we navigate these issues in the workspace?
Well, I have had this experience in professional meeting settings where someone was described as, we can't even understand you. You're so inarticulate. Today's professional code of behavior and ethics says that in public meetings, you must behave in accordance with the rules of the association sponsoring it. And I think we still have a ways to go before people understand that that is their right to complain about, that people in the room can immediately challenge this, that they can call someone from the association to come in and deal with it. And when I began talking with this person, she had no idea these were her rights as a invited presenter to not be treated in this way. And that person had to be identified and someone had to deal with that. That was the rule of the association that was hosting the meeting. And I think we've just got to spread the word that we don't deserve that kind of treatment and we will not tolerate that kind of treatment. And it is everyone's responsibility to speak up. In this particular case, the rest of the room was quiet because as someone reported, it happened so suddenly. We actually couldn't believe it was happening. And then it was done, and the person tried to go on with the presentation, but you could see she was visibly shaken. And no one said anything to the person who did it. Not the moderator of the panel that was presenting, not the person in the room who was the, kind of watching, observing from the association. No one said anything. And I don't care if it's an esteemed professor from a nationally or internationally recognized university with a boatload of books and research grants. Nobody gets to treat anybody that way.
Mic drop.
Wait, I have nothing else. She said it.
I told y'all I have reached an age where I just don't tolerate certain things. I'm a good old lady at being a good old lady. So I just don't tolerate certain things. And I have done enough over the course of my career to demand certain things from people. And I will not retreat from supporting Black women in public spaces who are being harmed by the behavior of others. I will simply not retreat from that. So anybody on the call who's ever presenting something and I'm in the audience, if somebody does that, trust me, I'm standing up and saying, okay, you're on now, brother.
Well, thank you so much for modeling how to advocate and really how to be an ally for people. So that will conclude our Q&A section. And I will turn this over to Dr. Anderson for our closing remarks.
Fantastic. First and foremost, I'm just honored to be in this space with you all. I'm looking over at my notes because I was writing so fast and I just couldn't get all the pearls of wisdom that have been dropped in this session this evening. And clearly, we could go on probably for a couple more hours. But I hope this is the beginning of conversations that those of you who are participating that I cannot see currently will continue to have. I do want to make mention of a few key points that I got from this session. And then we're also, for those of you in the audience, going to be sharing a slide with mental health resources. So before we get to that slide and me thanking our discussants this evening, the things that I learned, which were many, plentiful, and I'm going to need to watch this playback after the session, was that the system needs to change. We need to have dialogue. Perception needs to shift. Positive self-talk, and I have a number of exclamation points following that. Rest is a verb. I really like that one. Find joy. And what I'm going to add on to that is hold on to it. We can't pour from an empty vessel. Seek help if and when needed. Connect and find community. And again, this cannot be the end of the conversation. We need to keep it going in our close circles, communities, and when we meet new physicians, new mental health providers, care providers in general, to stand up for ourselves and ask the questions that are important to us and our care. So with that, and again, before I close and thank our discussants, I do want to have us share a mental health resource slide. Those of you in the audience, feel free to take a photo of it. I don't know if you can screenshot it somehow. Take these resources. It's not all of the resources, but these are resources that those of us who are on the panel have put together for you to think about, to consider, to look up. And one that I will highlight in particular is 988. At any time, any of us, if we have thoughts of wanting to harm ourselves, kill ourselves, if we have thoughts of I'm in crisis and I just need someone to talk, don't have anyone to turn to, you can call or text 988. Share that with people in your community, your close circles. Tell any and everyone about 988 because it's an easy access resource that I tell all of my patients. I see children and adolescents. I tell their families, besides all of the resources on the screen, please never go about it alone because you're not alone. And please reach out. Please, if anything I could say to you, please reach out for help if and when needed because you are worthy, you are deserving, and we're so glad that you are here with us this evening. So again, take a picture of this screen. And now I'll come back to the discussants. What an incredible conversation. You know, I started this talk by saying this is a crucial conversation. And you all have come together today with us to have that conversation, but again, to set the tone that we can continue to have this dialogue even off this call. So I'm so grateful for you all, Dr. Stewart, Dr. Washington, Dr. James. Thank you for your time, your energy. It was needed and necessary for this evening. And we are so for you. And we hope to see not only all of you on this call who were sharing the knowledge, dropping those gems, who dropped the mic this evening, but all of you hopefully will join us at National Medical Association's convention in July. The Council on Concerns of Women Physicians hosts a luncheon each year, and we hope to see you there. But even then, we wish you much joy, much peace, much rest, because again, that's a verb. I learned that today. That's a verb. And we hope that you will join us at future CCWP talks, conversations with CCWP. But again, thank you so much, everyone who has attended this evening. Be well, be safe, and I wish you a happy Mental Health Awareness Month. So take care, everyone. Have a good evening. Good night.
Bye-bye.